I gave my daughter everything: $34,000 for her house, $27,000 for his car, $42,000 for her wedding. Yet on her big day, my photo was on a blacklist. No father, no seat, no respect. But what they forgot was that every flower, every song, every plate of food had my name on it. And without me, the wedding collapsed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room that evening, the same room I had built my life around for more than 40 years. The oak floors creaked under my chair, the same oak I had sanded with my own hands back in 1985. The sun was setting through the large bay window, spilling orange light across the photographs on the mantel. Those photos told a story. My late wife Margaret holding our newborn daughter, Rachel, her first steps in the backyard, her graduation in cap and gown. Every picture seemed to whisper of love, sacrifice, and years of effort. And yet, here I was, sitting in silence, carrying the unbearable weight of betrayal. I kept going back over the numbers in my mind as if adding them again would make sense of what had happened. $125,000. That's what I have given them in the last 3 years alone. $34,000 for the down payment on their first house because they didn't have enough credit to qualify. $27,000 for David's car, the shiny black SUV he insisted he needed for his consulting business. $14,000 to help Rachel finish her student loans when she changed jobs and couldn't keep up with the bills. And $42,000, the biggest check of all, for the wedding. My daughter's wedding. The one where I stood outside like a beggar while guests ate crab cakes I had paid for. Every number felt like a nail hammered deeper into my chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the time, the faith, the dreams I had invested in her. I remembered when Rachel was 10 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, struggling with her math homework. I stayed up until midnight helping her, drawing numbers on scraps of paper, telling her she could do anything if she just tried hard enough. Back then, she believed me. Back then, she still called me her hero. How could a daughter who once looked at me with those trusting eyes now see me as nothing but a walking wallet? I looked around the room. My home had become a museum of a family that no longer existed. The oak dining table where we shared Thanksgiving dinners. The family portrait above the fireplace, taken before Margaret passed away. I could almost hear her laughter echoing from the kitchen, the way she used to hum while stirring soup. Margaret loved this house. She always said, "This home will be Rachel's legacy someday." The house is worth about $600,000 now, maybe more, and I know in my bones that Rachel and David have their eyes on it. They see it as theirs already, as if I am just a placeholder until I step aside or get pushed aside. The thought sickened me. I remembered overhearing something at the wedding planning meetings when they didn't think I was listening. Patricia, David's mother, leaned over and said, "Once he's out of the picture, things will be easier." I didn't say anything at the time because I wanted peace, but those words have haunted me. Out of the picture, that's what I am to them now. Not a father, not a man who sacrificed, just a problem to erase. And to think my ex-wife, Linda, stood right there, nodding along. Linda, who once promised forever, is now standing shoulder to shoulder with people plotting my humiliation. That betrayal cut even deeper than the blacklist at the gate. The shock of it all had left me numb. But as the hours passed, numbness turned into clarity. I began to see the truth for what it was. They never saw me as part of their family. They saw me as a resource, a cash machine, a man to be tolerated only as long as the checks kept coming. And once I refused to play that role quietly, they tried to cut me out completely. That realization hurt more than words can describe, but it also gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. If they thought I would keep funding their lives while being treated like garbage, they had another thing coming. I leaned forward in my chair and opened the drawer of the old oak desk against the wall. Inside was a folder, thick with papers, insurance policies, the deed to the house, investment records. I pulled them out one by one, spreading them across the table like weapons. Each piece of paper represented security, leverage, and power. For too long, I had trusted blindly, assuming family meant loyalty. Now I saw those documents in a new light. They were not just paper. They were my shield, my proof. My way of saying, "This is mine, and you will not take it from me." The more I looked at the papers, the calmer I became. There was Richard Cole, my attorney of 20 years, a man who had stood by me through business deals, through Margaret's passing, through estate planning. Richard was sharp, meticulous, and fiercely loyal. And there was Catherine, my accountant, who knew every detail of where my money went. Between the two of them, I had more than allies. I had guardians. If Rachel and David wanted a war over money, they would not be fighting me alone. That thought gave me strength. For the first time in days, I felt like I had the upper hand. But the feelings didn't come without pain. Sitting in that room, staring at those documents, I felt anger coil around my ribs like a snake. Anger at Rachel, who dared to look me in the eye and tell me it was less stressful if I stayed away from her wedding. Anger at Linda, who called me toxic while spending the money I worked my whole life to earn. Anger at David, who strutted like a king in the house I helped them buy, in the car I bought him, while plotting to cut me out of my own daughter's life. That anger was heavy, but it was also clean. It burned away the weakness, the self-doubt. It left only clarity. I whispered into the empty room, not to the air, but to Margaret's memory. "You see this, don't you, sweetheart? You see what they've done?" My voice cracked, but I kept going. "I won't let them trample me anymore. Not our home, not our legacy. They will not write me out of the story." Saying it out loud made it real. I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder, steady and sure, the way she used to comfort me when I doubted myself. That memory gave me courage. Margaret always believed in my strength, and for her, I would stand strong again. The living room grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon. The photographs seemed to watch me, silent witnesses to everything that had unfolded. I gathered the documents back into their folder and placed it firmly on the desk. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Tomorrow I will call Richard. Tomorrow I will call Catherine, and together we would draw the line. For the first time since being humiliated at that gate, I felt a sense of calm. Not peace, not yet, but calm. Because now I had direction. Now I had a plan. And as I stood and turned off the light, I whispered one last promise into the quiet room. "Margaret, you'll see. I won't let them get away with this. Not this time." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment one below to let me know you're here with me. I woke before dawn, the kind of early that makes the world sound hollow. The house was still, the air cool, the oak floor cold under my feet. I brewed coffee and set the mug on the same old coaster Margaret bought at a church fair, a ring of faded blue around a painted lighthouse. I looked at the clock, breathed once, and made the first call. It was time to stop feeling and start acting. Catherine answered on the second ring, her voice low, like she already knew. I told her I needed a clean rundown of every vendor tied to the wedding. She had the numbers ready, because of course she did. The remaining balance to the venue is due Monday morning, just under $12,000. The caterers' final invoice at a little over $18,000. The florist's cleanup and delivery, $4,800 even. The string quartet's balance, $3,200. The photographer's final $2,400. Transportation and incidentals, a few smaller charges that like to hide in corners and jump out later. In total, right around $30,000. All of it queued up to hit Monday at 9 a.m., all of it attached to my name, my account, my signature. She asked carefully what I wanted to do. I could hear her tapping a pen against her desk, waiting. "Nothing yet," I said. "Confirm every authorization is mine alone. Confirm you can halt, not cancel, and that notices can be sent at my direction." She exhaled through her nose like a nurse checking a chart. Yes, the contracts listed me as the payer of record. Yes, the final disbursements could be paused at my instruction. Yes, notices could go out. I thanked her and asked her to sit tight. I would call again. When I hung up, the settled quiet felt different. Not peace, but control. Control has a sound. It sounds like a pen clicking shut and a folder sliding into place. I sat there, warming my hands around the mug, and thought about what had happened yesterday and what might happen today. Pain and pride are noisy at first. Then they become tools. I pulled a yellow legal pad toward me and wrote down names. Venue manager, caterer, florist, band leader, photographer, transportation. I wrote down numbers and email addresses. I wrote down the time Monday's payments were scheduled. I wrote down Richard Cole. By 7:15, I was in the car. The streets were empty, the sky turning from gray to the soft pink that always makes the world look forgiving. I drove past the park where I taught Rachel to ride a bike, past the diner where Margaret and I used to split pie on Sundays. Memory has a way of tugging at you when you need to move forward, but the wheel in my hands kept me steady. I had promised myself last night that I would not go to the venue to fight. I would go to see it with my own eyes. That's all. See, remember, and decide. Halfway there, I pulled over in a grocery store parking lot and called Richard. He answered with that dry, careful tone of his, the one that has carried me through closings and wills and the terrible hospital week when the world shifted under my feet. I told him what I had seen the day before, the photograph of my face with the words, "Do not allow entry," the guard's expression, and the call with my daughter, where she said it was a group decision. I told him what Catherine had confirmed, the totals, the timing, the authorizations. First step, Richard said, document everything, times, names, words used, send me photos if you have them. Second, you have the full right to pause payment on any service where you are the payer of record, especially if your access was restricted. No law forces you to fund an event you're barred from attending. Third, secure your own assets. Confirm the deed. Confirm your beneficiary designations. Make sure no one has slipped in a durable power of attorney you didn't sign. His voice was a metronome. I wrote it all down. He told me to forward vendor contracts and to blind copy his office on any notices. He reminded me to keep my voice calm and my words simple. Facts travel farther than anger. He paused, then added something he rarely says. Thomas, they pushed first. You're not retaliating. You're protecting your interests. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. I ended the call and took a long breath. They think I'm weak, I said into the quiet car, but the game has only just begun. Saying it out loud made my shoulders loosen. The words were not bluster. They were a promise I intended to keep. When I turned back onto the road, a breeze pushed a swirl of leaves across my windshield. I followed the 2-lane out of town, past fields and low stone fences until the countryside venue came into view. Elegant, sure, white draping between old oaks, a gravel lot filled with clean cars, a little sign with curly letters welcoming guests. I parked far enough away that I could watch for a moment without being noticed. A pair of bridesmaids crossed the path in blush dresses, clutching their phones like passports. A groomsman jogged back from the main house carrying a forgotten tie. The string quartet tested a phrase of something sweet and old, and it floated toward me, lovely and indifferent. I walked to the entrance. The guard from yesterday was on shift again, polite but solid, a man trained to do what the paper said. He nodded a hello. I told him my name. I told him I was the father of the bride. He didn't argue. He merely asked for an invitation. I pulled up the family group chat on my phone, the thread full of Rachel's exclamation points and photos of centerpieces. He shook his head with an apologetic smile and stepped aside to the little folding table. The folder lay open, and there it was. My photograph, printed from a picture at a family barbecue, was paper-clipped to a sheet that said, "Do not allow entry under any circumstances." I felt the ground tilt. It is a small thing, a printed image on cheap paper, but it carries a strange power when it is you. The same face that used to be in the front row of a school play, now flattened and labeled like a warning. I kept my hand steady. I asked who had issued the instruction. He said it came from the bride's family. He said he was sorry. I told him it wasn't his fault. Then I stepped back, far enough that I could see the gate, but not be in anyone's path. I called Rachel. She answered on the third ring, breathless, excited, fragile. Noise behind her, voices and instructions, and the soft click of a camera shutter. Her hello went still when she heard my voice. I kept mine level. There seemed to be a misunderstanding at the gate. They had my photograph posted. Could she please come speak to the guard? She didn't sigh. She didn't cry. She made her voice small and light, like she wanted to put this down and walk away. She said the words again. Group decision. Less stress. Best for everyone if I sat this one out. She said she loved me, and she hoped I would understand. Then she said she had to go. The click of the disconnect sounded like a lid closing. For a moment, I simply listened to the wind in the trees. Then I heard another sound, the soft hum of conversation curving like water around rocks. It took me a second to realize it was about me. A couple stood 10 feet away, their tickets in hand, reading the paper on the table. The woman put her palm to her throat. The man leaned in and whispered, not quietly enough. I caught the words, as people always do when they are the subject and the world assumes they have lost their hearing. He said something about a boundary. He said something about a father who could not let go. Another couple joined them, glanced between the photo and the real man standing nearby, and made that sympathetic face people use when they think you brought it on yourself. Someone else murmured, "Let him be. He has issues." I watched their eyes pass over me like I was a headline. It stung more than the sign. I did not argue. I did not step forward with receipts and a ledger. I stayed still and let the small burn move through me until it became something else. Not fire, direction. All those faces would be gone by midnight, but the contracts would still be on my desk in the morning if I let them be. I turned away and walked back to the far end of the lot, where my car waited in a shade line. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The world did not change. I did. In the car, I opened the notes from this morning and adjusted the plan. No shouting, no scene. Paper, time, precision. I sent Catherine a short message telling her I would call at 4:30. I asked her to have every vendor contact pulled up, to keep her email drafts open, and to be ready to send notices that final payments had been placed on administrative hold at the direction of the payer pending review. I told her I would take the band, the florist, and transportation. She would take the venue, the photographer, and the caterer. She responded with a single word that I have come to value more than any pep talk. Ready? I called the bank next, First Community, where an older gentleman named Don has been steady as a brick for 15 years. I told him I wanted a hold note on Monday's outgoing payments flagged for review. He pulled up the recurring schedule and read back the amounts. I confirmed them. He told me the bank would honor a written hold instruction sent before the close of business today. He gave me a simple email address used for such requests. He told me to include the phrase "client hold" and to attach a scan of my ID. I thanked him. I wrote it down. Simple steps, simple words. Often the difference between being hurt and being harmed is a piece of paper filed on time. I thought about leaving without seeing any more, but something in me needed to stand 1 minute longer. I stepped out of the car and listened to the quartet run scales. It was almost funny how pretty it sounded from the wrong side of a rule. I pictured Margaret standing next to me, her chin tipped toward the trees, that half smile she used when she caught me watching her instead of the scenery. I heard myself say what I wished I had said to Rachel a year ago. Respect is not a bonus. It is the price of admission. You do not pay for love with your dignity. By 11:30, the parking lot was full. The guests moved in delicate streams, a hush of satin and small talk. I kept my distance, but twice an older relative I recognized did a double take and then looked away, like I was an apparition they didn't trust. It is a peculiar thing to be both well-known and unwelcome. The guard kept his face a neutral mask. He did his job. I did mine. Mine was to remember. The phone lit up with a text from Linda. It was short. "Don't make this worse. Come back tomorrow and we can talk like adults." The words had the tone of someone scolding a boy. Something inside me finally settled. I typed 3 words. "Not today, Linda." Then I turned off the screen and let the quiet return. At noon, I drove home. The house opened its arms like it always has. I put a sandwich on a plate and ate standing up, not because I was in a hurry, but because sitting felt too much like waiting. Then I carried the vendor contracts to the oak desk, laid them out, and took photographs of every signature page. I forwarded them to Richard, blind copying myself and saving the thread. I attached a short note. Payer of record restricted from entry. I wrote out a simple, factual timeline starting from the first deposit I had made, down to the words at the gate. No adjectives, just facts. I wrote down the balance numbers again, the way you recite a phone number to make sure it is right. 12,000 to the venue, 18 and change to the caterer, 4,800 to the florist, 3,200 to the quartet, 2,400 to the photographer. I printed the page and put it at the top of the stack. At 2, I took a slow walk around the rooms. The living room, the hall with the family photos, the small study where Margaret kept her sewing machine, the kitchen that still smelled like lemon oil from last weekend. I ran my palm across the oak table and felt every tiny scar it had collected. My home is worth about $600,000. That number means something in the world. It is a number that wakes greed like a sudden noise wakes a sleeping dog. I touched the mantel and looked at the wedding portrait of my parents. I said their names out loud. Saying names makes the ground feel solid. Then I said Margaret's. It steadied me. At 3, I sat down to write the email to the bank, the one Don had described. I kept it dry. Client holds. Vendor payments scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. are on administrative hold, pending review and verification. I attached my ID. I attached the list. I copied Catherine. I copied Richard. I hit send. Then I drafted 6 notices for Catherine to tailor to each vendor when the moment came. I wrote them the same way: respectful, precise, factual. We appreciate your service. A temporary hold has been placed by the payer of record pending review. We will be in touch with an updated payment schedule. At 3:30, the phone rang. It was Richard again. He had read the contracts and confirmed exactly what Catherine had said in the morning. I had full authority. He reminded me to keep any recorded messages from the bride or her family. He asked if I had spoken to Rachel. I told him yes, that she had said the words less stressful and group decision, as if they were aspirin. He was quiet for a second, then said something I will not forget. People often call cruelty a boundary when they want to be praised for it. He told me to take care of myself this afternoon. He told me to let the paper do the talking. At 4:20, I set my phone on the desk and stood by the window. The light had shifted to that soft late-afternoon gold that makes everything look like it belongs. Neighbors walk dogs. A boy on a skateboard coasted by with one foot dragging like a rudder. I thought about the guests at the venue, finding their seats, laughing at little jokes, waiting for the first notes and the first plates. I thought about the guard at the gate doing his quiet job. I thought about the photograph of my face and about the whispers that curled around it like smoke. And then I thought about the line I had drawn in ink and time across the next hour. At 4:30, I called Catherine. She answered on the first ring and said the word again. Ready? I told her which vendors I would handle. I asked her to send notices to the venue, the photographer, and the caterer at 4:45. I told her I would call the band, the florist, and transportation at the same time. I asked her to blind copy Richard on each message and to make sure every subject line contained the words "payment hold by payer." I heard her typing. I heard the calm in her breathing. She said she had the addresses open and her finger on the key. I thanked her. I dialed the band leader first. Ethan picked up in a place full of clatter and music stands, his voice the voice of a man trying to keep art and business balanced on one narrow beam. I listened to him describe their set list and the timing, and then I said what needed saying. Clean and short. There were payment issues at the payer level. Their time would be covered for the trouble of setup by me, but the performance would not proceed unless he wished to do so without assurance. He was quiet, then thanked me for the courtesy most people do not extend. When I hung up, I felt the room grow still around me, like a stage when the lights cut to black. I called the florist next, and then transportation, keeping it simple, keeping it kind. Catherine messaged me to say her notices were out. The venue manager replied with a clipped sentence asking for clarification. Catherine responded with the contract page, the authorization line circled. The caterer replied with a polite acknowledgement and a request to discuss on Monday. The photographer's assistant sent a one-line note that told me all I needed to know. Understood. As the last call ended, I put the phone down and let the silence settle into the house. My hands did not shake. My breath stayed level. The plan was not revenge. It was a boundary drawn with a ruler. The hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the kitchen clock were the only sounds. Outside, the sky turned the deep blue that marks the hour when people raise glasses. I walked back to the mantel, to the picture of Margaret, and spoke in a voice meant only for her. "I'm doing this the right way," I said, "with paper, with time, with respect for myself." I paused. "They think they've won because they shut a gate. They don't know what I hold." I gathered the documents into a neat stack, clipped them, and slid them into a manila folder. On the tab, I wrote a single word: proof. I slid the folder into the top drawer of the oak desk and closed it with a soft click. The sound was not loud, but it carried. I stood at the window and watched the evening gather itself, thinking about how quickly people label a man when he stops doing what they expect. They call it stubborn when he refuses to be used. They call it dramatic when he refuses to be erased. They call it cruel when he insists on dignity. I let those thoughts come and go like cars at a light. I did not try to hold them. I had had enough. My phone buzzed with a short note from Richard, 3 words that carried weight. "Well documented, Thomas." I smiled, a small, tired smile that felt like a knot loosening. Somewhere out there, far from this quiet room, people were taking their seats and looking at their watches. Somewhere, a quartet was readying a song. Somewhere, a caterer was checking a list. Somewhere, a man who was not me was saying something sharp about a father who could not let go. All of it would keep moving, the way rivers do, until the first stone in the path made the current change direction. I turned off the lamp and let the last of the daylight hold the room together. I could feel the next hour waiting, the way you can feel the weather coming in your bones. I did not feel frantic. I did not feel eager. I felt prepared. It is a quiet feeling. It fills the lungs without rushing them. I looked at the photograph of my daughter when she was small, her hands sticky with cake, her smile so wide it made her eyes disappear. I put 2 fingers to the glass, a touch that left no mark, and said one more thing into the empty house. They think I'm weak, but the game has only just begun. When I stepped away, the clock struck the half hour. In the distance, beyond trees and roads and polite signs, a single domino tipped. I did not need to see it. I had already set it in place. And tomorrow, when the sun rose on a different story, they would learn what happens when a father stops being a wallet and starts being a man who remembers who he is. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The house held its breath with me at 4:29. The living room lamp was on, just one, a warm circle on the oak desk. My phone lay face down beside the folder labeled Proof. A pot of coffee steamed on a trivet Margaret had bought at a church fair, the one with a painted lighthouse. I stood at the window and watched the maple across the street shift in the soft wind. A boy rode by on a skateboard. A dog tugged at its leash. Life kept moving. My heart did not race. It settled. It knew exactly what to do. At 4:30, I picked up the phone and called Catherine. She answered on the first ring. "Ready," she said. I told her the timing again. 4:45. Send the payment hold notices to the venue, the photographer, and the caterer. Subject line exactly as written. Payment hold by payer. Blind copy Richard on each message. Keep it factual. No adjectives. Include the authorization page from each contract with my signature highlighted. She said she had the files open and her finger over the key. I called the bank next. Don at First Community confirmed the instruction he had described that morning was already on file. Client holds. Outgoing vendor payments scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. have been rescheduled. Paused pending verification. He read the list back to me, line by line. I thanked him and said we might add clarifying notes afterward. He understood. He always understood. Some institutions feel like strangers. This one had always felt like a porch light. I made one more call before the hour turned. The band. Ethan answered in a room that sounded like a half-tuned instrument, stands clinking, cases thumping, a few notes scattered like birds. I kept my voice even. I told him there were issues at the payer level. I told him I would compensate him for the setup and the time he had already given. I told him I would not ask him or his musicians to keep playing without assurance that the people running the event respected those footing the bill. He went quiet. He said he appreciated the courtesy and the clarity. He said he would protect his people. When the call ended, I imagined him looking down at his set list. I imagined the ink there and the neatness of it. Then I imagined him folding the paper in half and sliding it into a pocket for another night. The house was very quiet at 4:45. Even the refrigerator hum seemed softer, like the whole place was listening. Catherine's message came through. Notices sent. Copies attached. The venue auto-responded with a brisk "received." The caterer replied with a single line, "Understood. Will await update." The photographer's assistant sent the shortest message of all. Noted. It is strange how a one-word reply can carry the weight of a door closing. I called the florist. I called transportation. The conversations were brief, respectful. I did not explain the story. I did not use the word betrayal. I used words like authorization and hold and documentation. People in business understand those words. They are not cruel words. They are clean ones. By 5, the pieces were set in motion. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen window. The sky had moved into late afternoon, that golden hour that makes everything look kind. I thought about how many times I had set a grill out back and watched Rachel run in the grass, her hair flying behind her like a flag. I thought about how much a heart can hold and how much it must release. The first call came at 5:12. It was Linda. She didn't say hello. She asked if I had lost my mind. She asked if I understood what I was doing to our daughter. She used words like selfish and controlling, the kind of words that people use when they want to press a bruise and blame the pain on you. I let her talk. Then I said calmly that I was doing something simple. I was pausing payments on an event I was not allowed to attend. I said the sentence the way it deserved to be said, plainly, like a posted rule. If I'm not welcome at the party, I don't need to pay for the party. She told me I was cruel. I told her I was done being convenient. She told me people were going to talk. I told her they already were. She said Rachel would never forgive me. I said forgiveness is a door that swings both ways, and I had been standing in it for years, letting cold air in. I ended the call before her voice turned into a kind of keening I remembered from another life. I leaned on the counter and breathed. Then the second call came. This time it was the venue manager. Professional, efficient. A clipped tone that said he had seen a lot and liked to keep things orderly. He wanted to clarify the hold. I referred him to Catherine's notice. He wanted to know if there was a path to release. I told him that it depended on whether the people who had issued the instruction at the gate wished to discuss respecting the person who had signed his contract. He paused. He said he understood. He said he hoped the family could resolve their issues. He said he had events to manage and would make whatever adjustments the circumstances required. His voice was the sound of a ledger balancing. At 5:31, my phone vibrated across the desk. It was Rachel. The first words came fast, like stones rolling downhill. Something was wrong. The caterers were packing up trays that had not yet been served. The quartet had put their instruments back into their cases. The photographer had walked out to the parking lot and had not come back. People were whispering at the tables. Guests were looking at one another with the kind of faces people make when they are hungry and embarrassed at the same time. She asked me what I had done. There was a tremble in her voice I had not heard since she was a little girl and skinned a knee. I told her the truth. I placed a hold on the bills you expected me to pay. I am the payer of record. I have that right. I reminded her of the sign at the gate, the photograph of my face, the words, "Do not allow entry." She tried to say it wasn't about me, that it was about keeping the day simple. I told her simple and kind are not the same. I told her again, slowly, so there would be no confusion. If I'm not welcome at the party, I don't need to pay for the party. She hung up on me. The silence after a click is a particular kind of quiet. It is the quiet of a book with the last chapter torn out. I stood in it, steady. The phone rang again almost immediately. It was Patricia, the mother of the groom. She sounded furious and breathless, like someone who has run across a room in heels. She said I was humiliating them. I said they had already humiliated me. She said this was Rachel's day. I said it had been our day until someone decided a father was a problem to be solved. She said I would regret this. I said regret is what you feel when you betray yourself, and I had had enough of that to last me. At 5:45, a text from Ethan. "We are packed, leaving the property." "Thank you for your honesty earlier," I typed back. "Thank you for treating your people with respect. Drive safely." The words looked small on the screen, but they meant what they said. I set the phone down and poured fresh coffee. I took the mug to the front room and sat by the window, the way Margaret used to do when she wanted to watch the light change across the lawn. I thought about the money I had spent over the years. The numbers lined up in my head like mile markers. $42,000 for the wedding, $34,000 for the down payment, $27,000 for that black SUV. David insisted he needed to look credible. $14,000 to help Rachel finish school. And more, much more, in the little uncounted things that add up. Groceries when times were tight, utility bills when a promotion was late, the quiet money all parents spend without keeping score. I had kept no ledger until today. Today, I had to. At 6, the phone rang again. It was Diane, Linda's sister, her voice low and careful, the way a person speaks when they know the truth is a hot pan and they are trying to set it down without burning anyone. She told me she had been at Linda's house the week before the wedding. She told me they had papers on the table. She told me words I did not want to hear but needed to. A loan application, a plan for a business line of credit. A bank had given them a conditional approval, $250,000, but only if they could provide additional collateral or a co-signer with substantial assets. My name had been mentioned more than once. Patricia had called their approach perfect psychology. Break him first, make him feel guilty, make him desperate to get back into Rachel's good graces. Then present the papers. He'll sign. He always signs for Rachel. I set the mug down and listened to the silence between Diane's sentences. She said there had also been a second plan, darker, saved for later if the cosign didn't come quickly. An intervention, they called it. Whispers about my judgment. Suggestions that I was struggling and might need help managing my affairs. 2 words floated there, ugly and clinical: power of attorney. I felt the room tilt, just a little, but I kept very still. Diane apologized for not calling sooner. She said she had tried to talk them out of it. She said she couldn't watch them do this to me. She said she wasn't brave, only tired of lies. I thanked her and told her the truth. Her call had not come too late. It had come exactly on time. When we ended the call, I forwarded a summary to Richard. Short, factual, names, words used, the phrase power of attorney placed in quotation marks. He replied within minutes. Understood. Document conversation. Keep messages. Do not respond emotionally. He attached a PDF on his firm's letterhead, a simple notice of pay or hold, the language clean and precise. It affirmed my status as payer of record. It noted my restricted access. It requested that all vendor communications regarding performance and payment be directed to the bride and groom's listed contacts until further notice. I printed it. The paper felt heavier than its weight. At 6:30, my phone filled with pings like hail on a tin roof. Texts, calls, voicemails. A cousin told me I needed to reconsider. A neighbor asked what he should say to a mutual friend who was at the venue and confused. A relative I hadn't spoken to in years, typing the word shameful and sending it into my pocket like a rock. I did not respond. Response is not the same as control. I have learned that too late and now exactly on time. At 7, I stepped outside and stood on the porch. The air smelled like cut grass and the first hint of night. Somewhere in the neighborhood, someone was grilling. A child laughed, the steady, normal sounds of people who did not have a war raging in their living rooms. I thought about Margaret's hands, the way she used to fold them when she prayed. I did not pray. I spoke. "I am not a cruel man," I said to the gathering dark, "but I will not be erased." The sentence hung there and then seemed to be absorbed by the trees. At 7:20, Rachel called again. Her voice was jagged. She said the guests were leaving in clusters. She said people were posting to their feeds. She said someone's aunt had recorded the quartet carrying cases to their car. She said Patricia was furious. Linda was crying. David was on the phone in the corner with someone from the bank, and the venue manager had just told them they needed to make arrangements or clear the space. She said I had ruined her day. I listened as a father and as a man. Both hurt. Both stayed steady. I told her she had made her decision when she put my face on a blacklist. I told her that the decision had consequences. She said I was punishing her. I said I was teaching her a boundary. She said I would regret it. I said regret is a merchant who sells cheap forgiveness. I had no more business with him. By 8:30, the house had gone completely dark except for the lamp over the desk. I sat there, hands flat on the wood, and felt the line I had drawn become not a threat, not a pose, but a fact. Somewhere in the world, the party I had paid for without being allowed to attend was collapsing in slow motion. People were whispering. People were angry. People were hungry. It should have made me feel mean. It did not. It made me feel like a man who had finally refused to be used. At 9:17, the knock on the door came like a fist on a drum. Not polite, not tentative, demanding. The porch light threw shapes across the glass. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and went to the door. I did not open it all the way. I never do when the air outside feels like weather coming in. Rachel stood there first, face blotched from crying, eyes wild. David was beside her, jaw tight, sweat shining above his lip. Patricia hovered behind them, lips pressed so hard they had blanched. Linda stood on the step, a hand to her chest, playing the part of a woman who cannot believe what the world has done to her. Rachel started with the word Dad, the way a person starts a plea by naming the only person who can answer it. She said they had come so we could fix this. She said I could still do the right thing. She said if I released the holds, everything could be salvaged. The word salvaged landed with a dull thud. David said there had been a misunderstanding. Patricia said I was making the family look like fools in front of 300 people. Linda said I had broken my daughter's heart. Their words layered over one another until they sounded like a crowd in a hallway. I let them finish. Then I asked a question. I asked who had given the guard my photograph. No one answered at first. Rachel looked at David. David looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at the hedge. I asked again. David said he had printed it because he had been told it would be best for Rachel's stress. He used that word the way people do when they want to make cruelty sound like medicine. I nodded. I asked who had brought the loan papers to Linda's kitchen table. Rachel said it had just been an idea, a hope, something they might discuss if the timing felt right. I asked who had spoken the words, power of attorney. No one answered. Silence can be so loud you can almost hear it ring. I told them what Diane had told me. I kept my voice flat. I said the amount, $250,000. I said the phrase additional collateral. I said a cosigner with substantial assets. I said perfect psychology. Patricia flinched. People always flinch when their own words come back to them wearing your voice. Linda said Diane had misunderstood. I said Diane had repeated words I recognized because I had lived long enough to know how a trap is baited. Rachel took a step forward and started crying again, the kind of crying that asks for the old solving, the father who fixes, the man who writes the check. Something inside me that once might have moved toward her stayed exactly where it was. I told them a few other numbers, not to brag, but to anchor the air to the truth. $42,000. That's what the wedding cost me. Over $80,000 more in the last 3 years. $34,000 to help them buy a house they walk through like a hallway they earned. $27,000 for a car, David say. He needed to look like a man he hadn't become yet. $14,000 for student loans, Rachel said, was crushing her. Groceries, utilities. Little lifelines I tossed into water I didn't know was so shallow. I said the numbers the way you say a poem you have finally memorized. Patricia started to speak. She tried to say the word boundary like it was a hymn. She tried to tell me I was making a scene now. She tried to tell me we could all apologize and move on if I would release the money. I shook my head. My voice came out quieter than I expected, which made it sound stronger than if I had shouted. You wanted a day without me, I said. Now you know what that looks like. David said something about legal action. I told him to take all the legal action he liked. I told him Richard was very good at letters. I told him we would be fine in rooms with wood paneling and quiet rules. He blustered the way a man blusters when the floor he planned to stand on has turned to water. The anger in him was not the hot kind. It was the kind. It made him look smaller. Rachel put her hands together like a person praying. She said she had made a mistake, that she had been under pressure, that everyone had said it would be better without drama. I told her the truth I had learned yesterday and written down on paper today. Respect is not a bonus, I said. It's the price of admission. Her face crumpled and then tightened, the way a person's face does when it realizes it can no longer buy what it wants with tears. Patricia tried one more time. She asked me to think of the family. I told her I was. I told her I was thinking of the kind of father a daughter should be raised to honor. I told her I had been that man. I told her I still was. Then I said the sentence that had been sitting in my chest since the guard showed me the paper on the folding table. The father who would have rescued you died the morning he saw his face on a blacklist. No one spoke. The porch light hummed. A moth bumped the glass. Linda made a small sound and put her fingers to her temple, the way women do in movies when they want the scene to move on. David stared at his shoes. Patricia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Rachel looked as if she might reach for me. I did not move. I held the door open long enough to be polite, and then I closed it until only a slim wedge of light remained between us. I told them they could call Richard if they needed anything further. I told them I wished them a safe drive home. Then I closed the door. The click of the latch was louder than it should have been. It sounded like something finishing. I stood in the foyer and breathed through my nose until my rib cage loosened. The house smelled like coffee and lemon oil and old wood. I went back to the desk and sat down. The folder marked proof lay exactly where I had left it. I slid Richard's letter inside. I placed a copy of the bank's hold confirmation behind it. I added a printed image of that photo from the gate. I closed the folder and put it in the drawer. My phone buzzed on the desk. A final message from Catherine. All notices acknowledged. She added 4 words I read twice. You did the right thing. I typed back 2, thank you. Then I turned off the lamp and let the room go dark except for the square of light from the street. I stood by the window and watched the night settle over the road, slow and sure. Tomorrow there would be noise, opinions, stories told by people who like to stand around a fallen tree and argue about which way it should have leaned. There might be posts, there might be a local reporter sniffing around for a human interest story. There might be people who wanted me to speak and people who wanted me to be silent. But tomorrow was not here yet. Tonight, there was only the steady feeling of a line that had been drawn and would not be moved. I whispered into the quiet, to Margaret, to the house, to the man I have been and the one I am learning to be. They thought I was weak, I said. They thought I would fold. Now they see consequences. The words did not echo. They did not need to. They knew where to go. Out on the porch, the moth kept batting its wings at the light. It was a small, stubborn thing, a creature drawn to brightness even when glass was in the way. I watched it for a long minute, then reached up and clicked the switch. The light went off. The moth drifted into the dark, free to find another star. Feeling overlooked, dismissed, or used is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and treated with dignity, comment the keyword, justice. Now let's see what they'll do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt lighter, almost like it had been holding its breath for weeks and finally let it out. I woke before sunrise, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat by the window with the oak table still steady under my palms. The night before had left me raw, but not broken. In fact, for the first time in years, I felt like I had drawn a line that could not be erased. The father they thought they could treat like a wallet was gone. What remained was a man who knew his worth and who wasn't afraid to defend it. News traveled fast. By mid-morning, Catherine forwarded me a string of emails from the venue and the caterers. They had formally canceled services, citing non-payment. But this time, the legal burden wasn't on me. The contracts were written under my name as payer of record, and the hold I placed was valid. The vendors would now have to pursue Rachel and David directly. Richard confirmed it in plain terms. They're the ones who barred you, Thomas. They accepted the benefits of the contract while excluding you. They'll be the defendants, not you. He explained it with the steady calm of a man who has seen families torn apart by greed before. I read his words twice, then filed the emails into the proof folder. The weight of those pages was no longer heavy. It was protective. Within days, the calls began. Vendors demanding payment from Rachel and David. The caterer had already drafted a legal complaint. The photographer wanted damages for breach of contract. Even the bandleader Ethan had sent a notice, kind but firm, requesting reimbursement for the day lost. I stayed out of it. I did not need to lift a finger. The choices they made in their arrogance had caught up to them. The image of my face at the gate had been their statement. Now the world was answering back, not with sympathy, but with invoices and court summons. I learned through a neighbor that the loan Rachel and David had pinned their hopes on, $250,000 for a startup David claimed would change everything, collapsed immediately. The bank withdrew the conditional approval the moment word reached them about lawsuits from vendors. No financial institution wanted to underwrite someone whose name was being dragged through civil court. I could picture David pacing in their living room, voice raised, papers scattered, watching opportunity crumble in his hands. A man who once smirked about psychology had failed to study his own arrogance. The fallout didn't stop there. Patricia and her husband, who had built a reputation in town as people of influence, suddenly found themselves whispered about at the country club and at church. Folks talked about how the family had humiliated the very man who funded the wedding. They talked about how foolish it looked cutting off the hand that had held them steady for so long. Reputation is a fragile currency. One scandal, one sign of greed, can unravel years of carefully built respect. And I knew, as sure as the sun rose, that they would not recover quickly. As for me, I protected what mattered. The house, valued at $600,000, remained under my name alone. The deed sat in my desk drawer, and every time I touched it, I felt grounded. My savings account, just over $300,000, was safe after Richard advised me to shift it into a trust that no one else could touch. For the first time in years, I knew my assets were secure, not dangling like bait in front of desperate hands. And I didn't stop there. I transferred a portion into the Community Foundation, a local charity that funds food banks, scholarships, and park restoration. Writing that check, seeing the director's tears, felt better than any applause. It meant the money I had earned and guarded would not be wasted on schemes. It would build something real. With those choices made, a kind of quiet settled over me. It was not the silence of being excluded, the hollow silence of the blacklist at the gate. This was different. It was the quiet of freedom. I woke in the mornings and read Marcus Aurelius, his meditations underlined by my own pen, notes in the margins like small conversations across centuries. I tended the garden Margaret and I had once walked through in summer evenings, cutting back the roses she loved, planting tomatoes in neat rows. On afternoons, I walked to the park, fed the ducks, watched children run with kites, and let the air fill my lungs without the weight of anyone's expectation. Each day felt like a return to something I had lost, the ability to live without debt to anyone's demands. Meanwhile, the voices that once filled my phone grew quiet. Rachel called once, weeks later, her voice trembling. She said she was sorry. She said it had gotten out of control. She asked if I could help settle the lawsuits. I listened, but I didn't answer. Finally, I said one sentence, steady and soft. A family does not tape a father's face to a gate. There was nothing else to say. I ended the call. Afterward, I sat in the garden, the soil dark and rich under my hands, and whispered to Margaret, I chose us, not them. And for once it didn't hurt to say it. Their lives, from what I gathered through whispers and reports, grew smaller. Rachel and David moved out of the house they once bragged about and into a rented apartment above a strip mall. Patricia stopped attending club events, too embarrassed to face the sidelong glances. Even Linda, who had called me cruel, avoided the supermarket near my neighborhood. It wasn't vengeance. It was simply a consequence. When you build your world on exploitation, the ground eventually gives way. The contrast between their unraveling and my own peace could not have been sharper. I felt younger, in a way, carrying less. I spent evenings with books, not bills. I cooked simple meals, poured wine into the glass Margaret once favored, and let music drift through the house. On Saturdays, I joined a community group that met to plant trees along the river. The soil stained my hands, and the laughter of strangers became something close to family. In giving, I found something I thought I had lost forever: belonging. The lesson carved itself slowly, like words etched into stone. For parents, love must be given with boundaries, because love without self-respect is not love. It is servitude. For children, parents are not wallets or safety nets to be cut whenever convenient. To treat them as such is to sever the very roots that sustain you. And for the world we live in now, with its hunger for more, with its eagerness to measure worth in dollars, there is a truth older than any contract. Greed will corrode the strongest bond. I had seen it with my own eyes, and I had survived it. Some evenings I would sit on the porch, watch the sun drop low, and let the breeze brush against my face. I would think of all the times I gave, of all the times I forgave, and of the morning I saw my own face on that blacklist. And I would whisper into the air, I don't need them anymore. I have myself. Saying it didn't bring bitterness. It brought release. Because at last, I believed it. The phone still rings now and then. Sometimes it's Rachel, David. Once Linda left a message, her voice cracking as she said she wished things had gone differently. I don't pick up. I don't call back. The line between us is drawn, and I will not let it be crossed again. My dignity is not negotiable. My peace is not for sale. Life has grown simple, and simple feels like wealth. I have the house, the trust, the quiet mornings. I have the garden, the park, the books, and the community foundation. I have myself. And for the first time in decades, that feels like enough. As I prepared the last of the documents with Richard, ensuring everything was locked down, he asked if I felt regret. I smiled, shook my head, and told him the truth. I don't regret protecting myself. I regret waiting this long to do it." He nodded, and I could see in his eyes that he understood. He has seen too many parents bleed themselves dry, mistaking sacrifice for love. That night I walked through the garden, lantern light falling across the soil, and thought about the seasons ahead. Autumn would come, the leaves would fall, and then winter would sweep the world bare. But spring would return, green and unstoppable. And so would I, each year a little wiser, a little lighter. I know now what family means. Fazy is the ones who respect you enough to stand beside you without asking for proof. Family is the one who do not need you to sign a paper to prove you matter. Family is the one who would never, ever put your face on a blacklist. Blood may bind us, but respect is the true inheritance. And so I move forward, not bitter, not broken, but free. I end each day with a glass raised, not to what I lost, but to what I reclaimed. Self-respect, peace, freedom. These are the true treasures, worth more than houses or accounts, worth more than any wedding that shuts its doors to a father. Tomorrow I will meet with the community group again, planting new roots in the earth, roots that will grow long after I'm gone, roots that no betrayal can cut down. And perhaps in that soil I will find the beginnings of a new kind of family, not one of blood or obligation, but one of respect and shared purpose. Yes, I lost my Amy daughter's smile that day, but I found something deeper, myself, and that is enough to carry me through every season left ahead. The apartment cost $200,000, but what I gained inside it was priceless. It sat across from a park where children chased each other, where dogs tugged their leashes, where every evening the sun stretched long and golden across the grass. My windows faced west, and in the late afternoon, the light painted the walls warm, just the way Margaret used to love. I set her old oak clock on the shelf, placed our wedding photograph by the lamp, and for the first time in months, I felt at home. Not in a fortress I had to defend, but in a space I had chosen, free of shadows. The days slowed in the best way. I rose early, brewed coffee strong, and took it to the balcony. I read Marcus Aurelius while the park stirred awake. His words about self-respect and boundaries found me differently now. They weren't philosophy anymore. They were proof that survival with dignity was possible. When the last page turned, I closed the book and whispered the line that had become my own. Character is the one asset no one can steal. I had defended houses, bank accounts, and investments. But what I really defended was myself. And I had won. I joined a local volunteer group that planted trees along the riverbank. On Saturdays, I laced up old boots, pulled on gloves, and dug into the soil with people who didn't care about my name, my past, or my bank balance. They cared about whether the sapling was straight, whether the roots were deep. I laughed with them, shared sandwiches at lunch, and for the first time in years, the weight on my shoulders felt gone. The betrayal still ached in memory, but it no longer defined me. It had been replaced with something better, belonging. Rachel's world unraveled in whispers. I heard through neighbors that she and David had left the house they once bragged about, forced to rent a cramped apartment above a laundromat. The lawsuits from vendors piled high, and creditors knocked louder each week. I imagined David's face when the bank letters came, and Patricia's when the gossip spread at the country club. The family that once called me an embarrassment now hid from the very society they sought approval from. And though pity tugged at me, I did not move toward it. Actions have consequences, and sometimes the only kindness is to let those consequences land. One evening, I came home to find an envelope in my mailbox. My name is written in Rachel's handwriting. I held it for a moment, the paper trembling in my hands, the way my heart trembled too. Inside was a letter of apology, words about regret, about being blinded by others, about wishing things had gone differently. For a moment, my eyes stung. For a moment, I thought of her as the little girl who used to tug my hand at the fair. But then I folded the letter back into its envelope and set it in the drawer. I whispered aloud, steady and sure. I don't need their apologies. I have my life. And that was enough. In those quiet evenings, I walked with the volunteer group around the park. The air was cooler by then, the sky a canvas of pink and gold. We laughed about small things, burnt casseroles, stubborn weeds, dogs that chewed through shoes. And as we walked, I felt the lesson settle deeper into me. Respect isn't optional. Boundaries aren't cruel. Love without self-respect isn't love at all. It's surrender. I had surrendered too much for too long. Now, finally, I had claimed myself back. For parents, the lesson is this: give love, but give it with dignity. Don't let devotion blind you to disrespect. Sacrifice is noble, but only if it doesn't erase you. For children, the truth is sharper. Parents are not wallets, not safety nets to be cut at convenience. They are flesh and spirit, deserving of honor. To treat them otherwise is to strip away the very foundation you stand on. And for all of us in this modern world, one truth cannot be ignored. Greed corrodes. It corrodes families, reputations, and souls. Without honesty and respect, even blood ties can snap. On my desk sat my father's old pocket watch, a relic of another time. Its ticking reminded me that the hours we have are precious. Money can vanish. Houses can be lost. But dignity is forever. Each time I wound that watch, I thought, this is the inheritance I want to leave. Not numbers on a page, but proof that I lived with self-respect. And so the circle closed. Rachel and David lived in the shadows of their choices, struggling with debts and whispers. I lived in light in a small apartment that overlooked laughter and green fields. Their world had shrunk, mine had widened, their ties pulled them down. My boundaries lifted me. I end my evenings on the balcony, the city humming below, the park alive with twilight. I watch the sun dip low, and I breathe. Peace feels like air filling my lungs without weight. I whisper to Margaret, to myself, to anyone listening, I don't need them anymore. I have myself. And the truth of it warms me more than the fading sun. Because family isn't blood alone. Family is respect. Family is those who don't put your face on a blacklist. Family is the people who see you, who honor you. And I have learned, through betrayal and through survival, that true wealth is this: self-respect, dignity, and peace. These are treasures no betrayal can touch, and no child, no ex-wife, no scheme can ever steal. Yes, I lost something, but what I gained was far greater. I finally found the place where I belong, and each day, each hour, is proof that I chose right. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.